a new M3 MacBook Air, and an iCloud lawsuit. This is MacVoices. MacVoices is supported by the MacVoices Slack. Discussions, questions, and answers, and a place to talk tech with your friends. The MacVoices Slack is available to all patrons of MacVoices. Sign up at patreon.com/MacVoices and join in. Just to try to stay on a little bit of a positive note, we now have an M3 Air, MacBook Air. Surprised? Excited? Anybody in the market for one of these?
If I didn't already have a 14-inch M2 MacBook Pro, I would be very, very tempted by this M3 MacBook Air.
I'm a little tempted only because I have the M2 MacBook Air as my second machine. But start looking at the comparisons. It's, the trade-in value on this M2 is not too terribly bad.
Yeah.
That could be a good thing. I mean, I just use it as a secondary travel machine, my MacBook Air. So, but it is compelling. I mean, but from what everybody's saying, it's not a huge jump as far as performance. I mean, the M3 obviously makes a bit of difference in processing than what the M2 does. But it's tempting.
It's spring shopping season, and I had to come up with some twisted rationale to get one. I have an M2 15-inch. I never take it anywhere. And for me, it was the portability of the device. It feels too big. I mean, I have bags down here that, I like to use Native Union. I like to use those sleeves. And once you take that and put it in one of those sleeves, it doesn't fit into anything. So the rationale was, I'm going to get it resized to the size that I use. When I travel someplace, I generally take a second screen anyways. I don't need a 15-inch and a second screen. So yeah, the price point was good for upgrading. Yep. And what they were going to give me for the M2. So I went ahead and did it. And my credit card was charged a couple hours ago. So it's probably on its way.
Nice.
And was it an Apple credit card where you get 3% back?
Yeah, it was an Apple credit card.
Good.
And I'm trading in the M2 and getting about half. I'm doing 1 terabyte, 24 gigabyte. Mm-hmm. I packed it because I figured
$18.99.
Yep, right.
Less minus whatever your trade-in value was.
You said you went with the 13-inch?
I went with the 13-inch.
Yeah. It's a good little machine.
Yeah.
I know where you can pick up an Apple Studio display cheap. The guy that had it is not carrying it around anymore. So.
Yeah. At the same time, I went through my closet, my shelf, and said, I've got 3 iPads. I don't need 3 iPads. I'm selling these back. So I'm kind of moving down in terms of product, so I can kind of stay up on top of one of each one instead of 3 of each one.
I mean, the other compelling thing is now it's M3 has support for 2 displays where the M2 did not. So that could put me over the edge.
But the chatter on that is with the MacBook Pro M3s, they're going to do a software fix for the M3 MacBook Pros that will allow them to do multiple monitors, because they're selling a MacBook Air that's able to do that, and their Pro model doesn't. So that's the rumor that says that it's a software fix in the future.
All right, I'm going to be incredibly ignorant right here, but that's okay, because I bet other people are too. Maybe I should have read more, done some homework before showing up, because people have been saying, hey, you can do the dual displays, which you can't do with a MacBook Pro. I can run, 6K displays off my MacBook Pro right now. I have an M2. What am I missing that's making the need to do a firmware update so you can have multiple display support on a MacBook Pro?
You're not showing your ignorance. You're probably right.
So, yeah, but I mean, it's a thing people are talking about.
How
So,
big is your current device, Jeff? Is it 13 or bigger?
I have a 14-inch M2
Well,
MacBook
there you go.
Pro.
There you go, right there. You have all this way more power in a smaller device. So,
Yeah, but people
and
are saying,
I'm just having a little bit of fun with you because Apple's just they're announcing all this stuff out there, and there's really no compelling reason unless you have lust and hormones that compel you to go and buy one of these things, absent a use case, of course.
yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, use case, that's what it comes down to for any device. I'm just lost right now trying to figure out why people are flipping out saying they're glad that there's a firmware update coming for the MacBook Pro so it can do multiple displays when it can already do multiple displays. So what is the key piece of information I'm missing that would make that make sense, since I can hook 6 displays or 8 displays up to my 14-inch MacBook Pro today?
I guess the question is, how are you connecting it? Are you using a dock? Are you using an external type of device to connect to them? Because this is talking about connecting 2 physical displays directly to the MacBook.
Okay. So right now, my limitation, I believe, on how many displays I can connect it directly is just a limitation of the number of ports that I have open. So I could do 3 Thunderbolts and an HDMI, so that would be 4 there. Otherwise, I'd have to use a dock.
Okay, because I've tried that, and on the I have the M1, so
which is different. The M1 is different.
Right.
Are you sure you can hook monitors to all those ports, Jeff?
Yeah, that's why I was kind of wondering.
I don't think that's right.
Well, if you look at the specs for the device,
which chip processor are you using?
Oh, let's see.
Because the Macs let you do multiple displays, but the M3 you couldn't, and I thought the Pro was limited, but I'm not sure. I didn't look at that.
Yeah, do you have the M2 Pro or M2 Max?
I have the M2 Pro.
It's a laptop, right?
Yeah.
And it's a laptop, 14-inch MacBook Pro.
I think you can only hook 1 external monitor to it. So then you've got 2, the external and the internal display. And what this now is going to allow you to do is close the lid and have 2 external displays.
Okay.
So you still only got 2 external displays, but it used to always count the internal as part of the limit. And now you can close the lid and attach 2 separate external displays.
And that was one of the things I was going to bring up, is that the closed lid mode. I don't know if that. I mean, I don't know why that would make a difference.
Because otherwise, you would only get 1 additional display. Get the internal plus an external, or if you close it, you could do 2 externals on the Air, on the new M3 Air.
So it's got circuitry in there to drive the internal display, and now it's letting you use that circuitry to drive an external display.
So if you look at the specs on the 14-inch MacBook, the M3, it says you get 1 external display. The M3 Pro, you could do up to 2 external displays depending on the resolution. The M3 Max, you could do, I think, like up to 4 external displays. So the chipsets mattered a lot.
So I may be wrong, because you say you have a Pro, but if you just had an M3, you're saying you have an M3 Pro processor.
Yeah.
Is that right, Jeff?
I have an M2 Pro processor.
M2 Pro. Okay, but there is a MacBook Pro that has just an M2 or just an M3 processor. Right? And that is the one that could only drive 1 external monitor.
Okay. So I was just missing that one key piece of information. and I do feel kind of ignorant and stupid because of that. So Jim, thank you for sorting that out.
Well,
And
it's
now I
kind of
have
confusing because it's a MacBook Pro processor and computer, but it could have an M2, an M2 Pro, or an M2 Pro Max CPU. So the terminology is
So I think my real problem is actually Apple and their horrible naming nomenclature for all of their products, because it's like all of us, we're like deep in the middle of this. And here I am, someone that has been talking and writing about this stuff for what, 20 years? Easy. And I was at a complete loss as to what the deal was here. And I just totally ate way too much time in the show tonight trying to sort that out.
No, Jeff,
you're not the only person.
No, I just threw articles in all the chat rooms. Two articles. The first one sort of pointed to the second one. The second one's where you really want to go. It's how many monitors can I plug into my Mac anyway? It's by Glenn Fleischman. It's on Macworld. And it really, I remember reading this, and Jeff, your question jogged my memory, because there were some things that just, since I'm not in the market for a machine right now, I read it with interest, but I didn't commit it to memory. But it is confusing as the devil, because
it is.
Some of the higher end machines can't drive the same number of monitors as lower end machines. So
yeah, it's stupid. And
Yep.
It's probably the same people that decided to name a spreadsheet program numbers, word processor, page layout, pages, and a presentation program, Keynote. By the way, all the music you listen to is in music. And when you stream shows, that's TV. All terms that are super easy to search on.
Is that any worse than documents, sheets, and from Google Docs?
You forgot
sheets.
No,
you forgot notes, Jeff.
It's not.
Slides.
Jeff,
or how about Microsoft Word?
Oh yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, at least Excel, we can search on that, but
Excel you can, but not Word and.
Hey,
Marty,
Jeff,
you were about to give me
Jeff,
advice.
Yeah.
Jeff,
If you just put epoxy in the little holes in the side of your computer, it will reduce the number of monitors you have to worry about hooking up.
That's brilliant. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, before you rag on Apple too much about maybe confusing product names or confusing features in an evolving and dynamic, MacBook product line. Last week, I was talking to an AI solutions architect at Microsoft, and I kid you not, the number of things that they have that has some sort of Copilot add-on, he said, he counted at least 34. So, they're a cluster F of confusion. At least Apple, that they always come out with superlatives talking about their latest and greatest product announcement. And a lot of time, especially recently, it's confusing of the overlap between the different products and different reasons why people should or should not upgrade. So with that, that's my 2-minute mind warning before I need to disappear and jump on another Zoom. But if we're done with this topic, I think maybe this is a good punctuation point for me to leave. Please don't talk about the scumbag lawyers and their suit about iCloud service, because I have a lot to talk about that, and that will last until next week.
Well, that's Mark. That's where I wanted to go next, because I know you said you had a heart out. Do you have time to give us a quick rundown on that? Because Eric brought something up in our chat that I want to make sure we get to that has to do with that. But yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'll just do a quick overview. These guys from this firm, that's known for suing Apple over all sorts of other things in the past. They filed on March 1st, a complaint saying that Apple has antitrust and they're overcharging people for prices of iCloud backup. And if you look at their complaint, basically what they're arguing is, hey, Apple has their own unique backup service. There are third parties that will allow you to back up documents and photos and videos, but Apple only narrowly what they call excluded or restricted files won't allow you to back up settings and messages, contacts, and your address book and things like that. And they're going on in a very biased way, complaining that, Apple, this is great. They have such a huge margin that, it's estimated by, they pick a number out of, a brown number. And for the audience, a brown number is something you pick out of, the place where you sit down because it's covered with, that smelly stuff. So they pick a brown number estimating that Apple's, gross margin on iCloud is above 80%. It may or may not be, but, no one knows for sure. But, they cite something that, is appropriate for the case. And they compare it to their overall product margin, which is like 45 or 48%, and say, see, this is proof of how egregious and how bad spirited and mean Apple is. When the appropriate comparison is to look at other cloud service providers' gross margin. If you look Dropbox is around 78-80%. If you look at Blaze, for the backup company, their margins, are a little bit, under 50%, 48-49%. If you look at Box, the other, the company that's out there that forever has had, backup tools for, iOS devices, their margins, are in the mid 75 to, 78 to 80% line. So, these are just, and I can say this because, my father was a lawyer, my brother was a lawyer. I've worked with a lot of lawyers. These are sort of, the pond scum, ambulance chasers, just trying to stir up, another case. On its face, they say, oh, Apple, forces you into this. No, you have a free 5 gigabyte, which is plenty, to sync your contacts and settings between all sorts of other devices. So, I think it's just another nuisance, lawsuit. And as Ken Ray says, on Mac OS Con, if it's a day of the week that ends in Y, it must mean there's another lawsuit filed against Apple. And with that, I'm 5:51. Actually, I set my alarm, 12 minutes early. So I have a little bit of time for discussion before I have to jump off, and I'll do that, even if I don't have a cue point, I'll just jump off when I need to.
Right. Well, and we'll do a goodbye now and then stick around as long as you can. Where can folks connect with you if they would like to comment on your comments?
Oh, at X, MarkFuccio, all one word, lowercase.
Great. Thank you, Mark. So I've read a couple articles on this, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that you can use other cloud services to back up your documents or store your documents. Mm-hmm. It's those restricted files. It's the settings for your machine and all that you can only send to iCloud. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Yes,
that's correct. And I think, Apple again would argue, if this ever, goes to, a trial, that, they do that, for providing, security and protection, which is, common thread for many things they do that outsiders, claim as unfair because they want, Apple to give them free access, to screw around with users' data like they can on Android devices. And, I'm mixing a statement of fact with an editorial comment there.
So let me get this straight. They think that Apple is gouging customers by giving them 5 gigabytes of storage for free, which accommodates the type of content that Apple wants to make sure can be synchronized securely. However, Apple is under no obligation to provide you with any sort of storage at all. But
Jeff, you're finding another way to look at the holes in their legal case is
yeah.
Because again, in their case, in their pleading, they cite somebody who's spending $299 a month, for whatever that is, 200 gigabytes or 250 gigabytes, and no reason of why they're doing that, and so their whole pleading is just filled with all sorts of logical and factual errors. So again, that's why I say they're just a bunch of ambulance chasers, trying to get another quick hit off of Apple. So I may be biased. I may be biased.
Well, as someone who has played an attorney on stage before, I feel totally qualified to jump in on it with you.
Webb, are you raising your hand? Is that what I see?
Yeah, I was just going to say a couple things. But before this issue came up, there was a call from several consumers wishing that Apple did increase the 5 gigabyte free, mainly because of photos, and how that could fill out space. So there's been a movement for Apple to increase that free space. Personally, I subscribe to Apple One. I got 2 terabytes of space. It's not an issue for me. But I remember that issue came up a couple of years ago. But some I don't want to call it a demand, but requests or wishes that Apple would expand that free space usage.
Sure, and that's reasonable. But I think you would agree or disagree that wishing they would increase that threshold is different than
absolutely
anti-competitive activity under the Sherman Antitrust Act and some other legislation which they cite in their pleading.
I don't want to elaborate, but I can tell you all kinds of stories about class action litigation.
Well, I can tell you that there's some members of the panel that are not here tonight. I'm not going to call any names, and I'm really not going to call any names. That feel very strongly that Apple is being cheap about this and should extend more. And I kind of look and say, okay, you're entitled to your opinion, but I went to the grocery store tonight to pick up a couple things, and nobody handed me something that because I was buying one thing, I should be entitled to buy another, or I should be entitled to a bigger thing than what I'm buying. Apple put a price on this. This is the way they do it. If you don't like it, then I'm constantly annoyed by Service A and Service B saying, do you want to sync your photos with us? Sync your photos with us. We'll give you $10 to sync your photos with us. Mm-hmm. And, and they're large, reputable services, but okay, so great. If I want to use them, that's where I'm with you, Mark. The whole argument falls apart. It's like they pretend like nobody has any other options. And and frankly, Apple is so privacy focused, maybe I shouldn't be allowed to sync my confidential information, my health information, all that onto anything except something that Apple deems is secure. Unless I want to use a third-party utility and download it. Sorry.
I think I think that is a very important point, which is that if you look at it, their suit is that there are third-party services and maybe they are more attractively priced than Apple, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But their whole thing is they go back to the data that's stored in the protective enclave, which needs to be, I think most people would argue, is very important. You want to be safe and secure. You don't want some third-party joker, $1 a month, $12 for a lifetime guarantee of backup storage. Because I'm sure we all get emails from a company with Mac and World in their name, offering services like that, and who would reasonably think that something like that can afford to have an operation where they have the highest quality of infrastructure and privacy practices. So I think that that's a that's a benefit of buying this device. And if you don't care about it, don't buy the device. Or if even if you don't care about it, a different way to think about it is if you buy an iPhone, you get 5 gigabytes of free storage in the cloud. Use it as you want. You're not forced to buy more. So again, Huggins, Berman, Sobel, Shapiro, LLP. I think they're just trying to score another quick hit, by misrepresenting, and stirring up trouble for Apple.
I'm going to ask a question of ignorance.
I already started the ignorance roll tonight, so run with it.
Yeah.
I've got 1 minute to go.
Yeah, it's a Tea Party question of ignorance. Is it that Jeff and I are in a tea party right now? Is the material that Apple is saying this needs to be stored on our server carry any proprietary content where they can say this is really, if we open it up to Joe Schmo, it opens up our system that's proprietary, whereas my photos don't necessarily aren't necessarily related.
That Marty, that's a great question, because now that I think about it, you have settings. You can elect to back up your address book, your network settings and things like that into the cloud. So it's not mandatory that people do it. So I think really it's a question of, what range of choices should there be available to people? And, people can always buy a lightning cable or USB-C cable and plug it into their computer and back it up, either using Apple or third-party products. So, to me, it looks like there's all manner of choices out there, and there's nothing, there's nothing, compelling or badly behaved in terms of what Apple is doing. Apart from, again, we all can complain and moan about prices, but we can either use it or not. That's a free choice decision that we have.
Mark, we succeeded. We made Mark late for his next call.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear your buzzer going off. So
I'll see you all, guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you,
Bye.
Chuck.
Right when you get work.
Okay.
I wanted to add, Chuck, that look at all some of the other cloud services that are out there and what free tier they offer. Okay, Microsoft's OneDrive, you only get 5 gigabytes. Okay, Dropbox, you only get 2 gigabytes. Now Google, a little more generous, they give you 15 gigabytes. And there's some of the other more not so lesser known cloud services that are out there that offer, probably maybe 20 gigabytes, which is, I guess fair. So, I mean, what's not to compare that? I understand because Apple is the company that's making our products, whether it be an iPhone, an iPad, Mac, whatever, and they make it so much easier for us to sync our devices because of the settings and everything else. But you still have other services that are doing the same thing, not offering a lot of space. Just
Hey, I think the argument that those people would make is those other services did not just get hundreds or thousands of dollars from you for a device. I think both of these can be true.
Yep.
Apple is being cheap, but it doesn't rise to the level of something that they could be sued over.
Yeah,
I think it's also important to note that if you purchase a new machine and you're trying to transfer your data, you can use up more than that 5 gigabytes of space while you're transferring devices. So there's a provision to let you temporarily take up more room.
Yeah. And
yeah.
I really like David's comment, because the tight integration that iCloud has with the Apple services is, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, because my experience is limited here, and I'm about to use the T word, but Microsoft and Teams, integrate the OneDrive stuff so tightly that you almost don't even know where your documents are, because it's that tightly integrated.
Again, that bringing my knowledge of the corporate world, you got SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive all working in symmetry with each other. So they're kind of OneDrive's probably the base of where it's all at, but you got the other areas where it just drives from OneDrive. So it's a little bit of a different thing, I would say. I'll give another point with OneDrive. I'd like to sometimes maybe I want to use OneDrive as another alternate way of backing things up. Microsoft now has a folder redirection now, so you can actually set it up so your documents, your desktop, and all your files. That's always been a big issue with OneDrive, especially in the corporate world, because of Macs having at such the mercy of what iCloud does. You can't have iCloud turned on and be able to use OneDrive to do the same thing. It does not work. When you try to set it up, it says nope. You have to turn iCloud off in order for you to be able to back up all of your files in case of your Mac. So you got that too.
Wait. I want to make sure I heard this right. Yeah. So if I want to use OneDrive to do that backup stuff like that.
Doing the folder redirection, meaning the automated backups of your desktop documents, just like what you do with iCloud now. You can't do it if iCloud's enabled on your Mac.
So Microsoft makes you turn off the Apple service to use theirs.
Because there's I think there's a limitation about how
technology
iCloud works. Technology driven. It's not because Microsoft's saying, "Hey, you suck, Apple. You shouldn't be doing this, so we're not going to let you sync it." No, it's a technical limitation between iCloud and OneDrive, unfortunately.
Okay, cool. That's why I asked, because if I need to get upset, I'm all in. But if I don't, I'll save that energy for something else where I should get upset.
Well, I'm upset because now I'm not being given the choice. I'm going to call that law firm that Mark mentioned and have them file a lawsuit on my behalf against Microsoft because they're taking my choice away from me.
Chuck, the irony would be
no. It's not Microsoft. I think it's a limitation.
They would file a lawsuit against iCloud. Apple on your behalf because Apple coded an architecture that doesn't allow OneDrive to do this thing simultaneously with iCloud.
That's why we use alternate backup services. Like I'm using ChronoSync. I'm doing that. I went to that product because I know ChronoSync can override everything and back up whatever I want automatically and do an automation. But also coming back into the corporate world, Web can side with me as well. Most corporate companies don't want to use iCloud. It's not secure. They don't want your corporate community to be using that because they can't control it. And so in this instance, a Mac on a corporate network using OneDrive is not going to be a problem because most of the time iCloud is blocked from being used.
I can tell you that's exactly what we do corporately.
Right.
Just for that very reason,
Mm-hmm. Got to have the corporate world has to have they want to keep tight grips of their data. I mean, and you don't know where it's going because Microsoft gives you a closed box of everything that goes in within that box.
To put it very simply, I just can't put any corporate data outside the corporate world. And OneDrive is considered inside the corporate world, and iCloud is not. So
yes.
I'm sorry Mark got away from me because I wanted to share this when he was here. There's a Freakonomics podcast called The Economics of Everyday Things. Mm-hmm. I'm throwing a link in all the chat rooms to an episode about personal injury lawyers. Okay. And it is both entertaining and enlightening. Now, we're not talking about personal injury lawyers here, but I think some of the concepts and the trends sound awfully familiar when it comes to this kind of thing. So it's not a long podcast, 21 minutes, according to the player here. It's well worth the listen, both for the history of personal injury lawyers and what is happening now, and the money they're spending to market themselves is frankly staggering. So
I love the tagline. If you can make it through 3 years of law school, you too might end up on a billboard.
And I also say I worked for a personal injury attorney in my prior life many, many years ago, so I had a bit of experience. But of course, it was a long time ago. Technology changed tremendously since then. But
when you say prior life, David, do you mean like
prior career? I should say
reincarnated as out of that role. Or?
I've been reincarnated in the role I'm in currently today. Yes.
This will be David's last appearance on MacVoices Live.
No.
I will be ejecting him right.
Okay, now we know where the bar is.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
That job only lasts a year and a half, so I probably shouldn't even have brought it up.
There are only certain things that we just will not tolerate. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.